My VIP cohort ready to lend an ear. We got something cool today. I wanted to change it up a little bit because I've been just doing these videos, and I wanted to showcase something really cool that just came to mind. And it's actually going to use the voice function of Claude. I went back through and I saw that it does pick up the audio. So what we're going to do is actually hop on there and then have a debate with Epictetus, one of the Stoics. If you don't know, he was a slave, became free in his 30s, flipping mastermind of Stoicism in the regards of like how to know the things in your control and outside of your control, and then just be at peace with that. It's a very strong take on how to have inner control of your world when things on the outside are not going as planned. He's a beast in that. I just wanted to have some fun on this. So without further ado, let's begin. Alrighty. Lead it off, Epictetus. Give me that question.
Settles back, unbothered. He's used to men stalling before the real answer comes. I already gave it to you, but I'll say it plainer. Once, and then you must answer. Name the one thing you want most, not a list, one thing, and then tell me, does its arrival depend on you alone, or does it depend on the choices of other men, the movements of markets, the mood of fortune? That's the whole question. A man who cannot say which of these his desire belongs to is a man ruled by hope rather than reason. And hope, Phil, is not a strategy. It is a debt owed to chance. So, speak the thing.
Epictetus, look, I have to take my outside resources and go after this hope of making fortunes beyond measure. And I know it is of somebody else's wanting of this. And I can't control those outcomes, but my oh my can I take control of my own life. And I will make it to the regards that I need to. 'Cause I know things are outside of me. Yet if I never go out into the world and try to conquer the external as well as the inner, I will not see the end of the path. Alexander the Great walked great miles to conquer. It's not to say that I am his equal, merely that he went out into the external and not just allow the internal to take his world. So sometimes we must exit out and lead from the front in that regard.
A slow exhale, not disappointed exactly, but the tone of a man circling his prey before he strikes. Ah, now, there it is. You've smuggled Alexander into a conversation about your own soul, and I want you to notice you did that before you notice anything else. Alexander is not a philosopher's example, Phil. He's every ambitious man's excuse. He conquered the world and died at 32, frightened of his own generals, weeping that he'd never see his mother again. Tell me, was he free? But let's stay with you, not him. You said something true and something false in the same breath, and I want you to hear the scene between them. The true heart, yes, go into the world. I never once told my students to sit in a room and only manage their inner weather while the body starved. Even I, a slave for years, still walked, taught, worked. Action is not the enemy. The false part is this. You said you must go after fortune because others want it for you, and others will decide if it arrives, and then, in the very same sentence, you called this pursuit taking control of your own life. Bill, which is it? You cannot borrow the courage of a warrior and the wisdom of a philosopher at once and pretend they point the same direction, when one runs toward what he cannot own, and the other runs toward what he can never lose. So here is my second question, and answer this one without Alexander in your mouth. Time when you fail to reach the fortune, not if, when, because every ambitious man tastes failure before he tastes gain. What will be left standing in you that you actually built and not merely acquired?
One that has went after both worlds. That's the only thing. To leave Alexander out of it, you must regard things as a result. Even your teachings, you wanted to get a result across from all the experiences prior. So in the regards, you must have some sort of delusionment to go after something, even if you know they are illusions, because it must convey the emphasis on what you're trying to bring across. Think of your philosophy. It is a regard of power, because you want people to take the regards of your life and apply it to their own, because there is lessons in it. But the painful thing about it is that when we try to explain our own story, the only way it can come out is that philosophy, because of so much trauma that has been about it. So the only way that we can solve this simply is to be in some sort of delusionment, but also know how to bend things in the regards of what is needed. If I must become a tyrant to make sure that the state runs, and the result of that is that it's still standing, then the regard is I must do that. If I only take the regard of being the Stoic, and it is required to keep the peace, then I must take that on as well. So the regards of it all, philosophy is a power that must be exercised to what is necessary.
A long pause, the kind he'd give a student who's just said something clever and also completely missed the floor beneath his feet. Careful, Phil. You've just said something worth pulling apart, because underneath the words, you've made philosophy into a tool for outcomes. In the moment you do that, you've stopped doing philosophy and started doing rhetoric. Those are not the same trade, even though they wear similar clothes. Let's take your claim directly. You said if becoming a tyrant secures the state, then the tyrant must take that on. Notice what you did there. You let the result justify the character. But I ask you, a tyrant who secures the state and loses himself in the process, is the state better for it, or is it simply ruled by a man who is no longer free? Because a man who isn't free cannot give freedom to anything he rules. He can only give order. And order without virtue is just a leash with better craftsmanship. Here's the deeper error, and it's the one I actually care about correcting.
We had an error. Dang. Can you repeat that line?
Sure, here's the question again. You said you're willing to bend into tyranny or whatever measures are necessary to get your result. So, is there anything you would actually refuse to become on the way to that fortune? Or has the fortune itself become the only fixed point, with everything else about your character now negotiable?
Look, that's a great line with the negotiation. And keeping in the Epictetus, I would say, in the regards, look at Thucydides. He looked at power in the regards, and that is a freedom in its own right, because he understood how it maneuvers. There is the regard that when all doors to peace end, the only last door is war, because there's always some sort of conflict. And the conflict of nature is that of what must be done. And in our own conscious, we must realize that we're trying to self-regulate. And it is a form of power. And it's the regard of what type of power that's exercised correctly. And correctly is under a bias. So the only way that we can look at it is from a positive, a negative, a neutral, and a hidden. And then we can only live the life in the regards and let the results speak for themselves. Epictetus, I would say this. If your thing allowed somebody to utilize it and then come out lesser at the end, wouldn't that be dangerous? Wouldn't you say that it is important for them to make sure to take up and strengthen in the regards of what's needed?
A beat, then quieter, more direct than before, like he's setting down the sparring for a moment. You just turned the question back on me. And that's fair, so I'll answer it straight before I press you again. Yes, if a man used my teaching and came out lesser, that would be a failure of the teaching or a failure in how he applied it. But watch what lesser means here. I never once measured a man's outcome by whether he became rich or powerful or victorious in the world's terms. I measured it by one thing only. Did he keep his judgment sound, his will his own, his reactions under his own command, regardless of what fortune handed him. So, no, a man could lose every coin, every position, even his freedom in the political sense, and still come out greater by my measure. And a man could conquer continents, like your Alexander, and come out utterly diminished, groveling to omens and poisoning his own peace with suspicion until the day he died. Power exercised without that inner discipline isn't power, Phil. It's just motion. Loud, impressive motion. Now, you've spent your last 3 answers building an elaborate architecture. Bias, positive, negative, neutral, hidden power, necessary tyranny, the last door of war. It's clever. It's also, I notice, entirely about the external, about how power moves, how it's justified, how results speak. You still haven't answered my actual question, so I'll ask it one final time, stripped of every escape hatch. Forget what's necessary for the result. Just tell me, yes or no, is there a line you would not cross, a thing you would not become, even if crossing it guaranteed the fortune? If your answer is no, then say so plainly, and we'll talk about what that costs a man. If your answer is yes, name the line. But don't hand me a framework again. Hand me the line.
The answer I will give to you is maybe. And here's why. You have cornered me whether a yes or no answer, but if I give you the maybe, then there is the regard that I could either choose the yes or no. And this is where I'm trying to go at with you. Your teachings, and even my teachings, go after this sense of power to, one, go after some part that we want people to understand. And in that, here's what I would say. There are some lines I would not cross myself. But in the regards, I must look at the regards of this. And it's weird. Anything I do has its positive and negative. And in that, I must respond correspondingly.
A genuine pause, then something almost like respect in his voice, though still edged. Good. Maybe is actually more honest than a clean yes or no would have been, and I'll tell you why. Because I want you to see what you just did, rather than just feel clever about it. You didn't dodge the question. You revealed that you haven't yet drawn the line. You know, a line exists, you feel its shape, but you haven't named it because you're still hoping you'll never have to test it. That's not cowardice, Phil. That's just where most men actually live. I only ever met a handful who could name their line before the moment arrived. Most discover it the way you discover a wall, by walking into it in the dark. But here's the danger in leaving it unnamed, and this is the whole crux of what I'd press you on if we had 100 more sessions. A line you haven't drawn in advance isn't a line at all in the moment of pressure. It's just whatever you happen to decide after. The temptation has already gotten its hooks into your reasoning. Self just now. Anything has its positive and negative, and I must respond correspondingly. That sounds like wisdom. It is also, without a fixed point underneath it, exactly the kind of reasoning a man uses to justify the thing he already wants to do. The tyrant doesn't think he's crossing a line either. He thinks he's responding correspondingly. So let me leave you with the one thing I actually want you to sit with, not as a debate move, but as the real teaching underneath all of this. You don't need the fortune to feel secure. You need to know, before the money and the power ever arrive, exactly what you are, so that when they arrive, they add to a man already whole, instead of trying to fill a man who's still hollow and hoping the gold will do the filling for him. That's not a rejection of your ambition. Go build Vipelex. Go pursue the fortune. Alexander's mistake wasn't marching. It was thinking the marching itself would make him someone. Don't make his mistake with better spreadsheets.
And I would respond to Epictetus this way. You go into the great line and you would want me to sit on this idea. Yet here's the idea I would give to you. There is a man who has a sword that can destroy the world. Yet he has that sword and he sheathes it and bends a knee and listens. That is the regard of anything that you do. the listening portion. So in the regards, when I told you maybe, the regards of which the situation dictates is what must come to respond. And everything we want a result. Even as you tell me, go sit and think on this, there is the regard that we must want some sort of result. And then it's getting some idea of thinking into what you have. And there is that bias. So we must, in any format, understand that whatever we say has the power to change both the world and about us, and our actions make that enforcement possible. It's not to tell you that I have no lines that I wouldn't cross, yet I do not know the situation nor my mind if it has sway. One day I may be the most benevolent king, and then the next I'm mad. So I can't give you that, and that's the regard of maybe. It's just to merely say that if I hold these things and I document them, whether by someone observing me or myself, that the sword, if I sheathe it and bend the knee and listen, that is a life that is trying to understand this. And greatness must require the march. And even if it fails and you weep at the end of it, at least you took the action. And that's all that we can ask for. You had to act and persist in slavery. So why not somebody act accordingly today?
A long moment he lets this one breathe before answering, and when he does, his voice has dropped the sparring edge entirely. That image is a good one, Phil. The sword sheathed, the knee bent, the listening. I'll grant you that freely, no debate trick in it. A man who holds power and chooses restraint in the moment is closer to virtue than a man who never had power to test at all. That much I actually agree with, fully. But listen to what you just did with the rest of it, because it's the same move you made with Alexander, dressed differently. You said, you cannot promise me a line because you don't know your own mind. One day benevolent king, the next day mad. And then you reached for me, for my slavery, and said, he acted and persisted, so why shouldn't I act accordingly today? Here's the problem. I did not act despite not knowing my mind. I acted because I had spent years under the worst conditions a man can be handed, discovering exactly what my mind was and was not capable of surrendering. My freedom wasn't a leap into the unknown of my own character.
Yeah, so this is what I did. I'm just going to let it be. And I'm going to come back here. Yeah, so that's what I did. My regard is, if you can start seeing how I debated there, I regard results as the main thing in the regard. And some Stoics would fight back heavily on that. Yet I think in the regards of like Thucydides and Niccolò Machiavelli, not in the regards of their evil, but the necessity of what must happen. If there is a tyrant that acts, and then I am just the peaceful sage, and I do not act. There are some regards where it can be beneficial, but I would go to Sun Tzu immediately. That's more of the strategy. Yeah, there must be an action of attack, some means of going forward. And one of my main philosophies that I think is being like a mobile fortress, one that knows how to defend and also attack. So one that can defend a castle as well as attack one as well. So in the regards that you can now maneuver, and that is a powerful place to be. So that's how I went. There was some breakage in there. It's still work in progress. Yeah, I find it so awesome that you can just like, hey, just do this and try that out. And in a debate, it's not them trying to agree. So my own point is that a philosophy is actually power. In some aspect, they wanted to change somebody's mind. And in that regard, they want to exhibit influence over that regard. Whether or not they want to agree is not the point. Whether I weep at my end is not the point. It's merely that we're trying to put something out there and then see if people will rally behind this. And then that's how things go. Whether for the best or worst, that's not for me to decide. Yet to look at it straightly as it is, that is the regard that anything that we do is trying to do. It can be masked so well under this guise of doing greatness, yet it can bring about calamity. And if somebody does not tell you that that's possible, they're full of what I will say is crap. Because if I tell you something, it can be used for harmful purposes or it can be used for great purposes. So the divinity and the consequences must be accepted with responsibility and accountability. To learn it is not the issue. It's how you exercise it that is. And then how do you accept how things go? And that's like one of the key points. Great minds can discuss things that great leaders in the future have. I went to Alexandria just because I've been doing a little research on it lately, and a lot of like the teachings they do is, especially like how he led, is flipping phenomenal. Now, some of his actions, yes, they're not great. There's some really atrocious ones. Nevertheless, to study what he did well and then to forget what, well, not so much like forget, but not utilize the parts that is not well suited, and then find your own esoteric way of making it work. That's the whole key of life. We have more than enough information today, and if we both bridge our knowledge and our physical prowess to be the best that we can possibly be, then we're in a spot of, I would say, a great reckoning of doing what we need to do. And with it, what happens when we lose motivation to listen today, I would say, and we still do it anyways? Does that make us more resilient? Some would say yes. So this is just like one cool thing that I wanted to test out. I'm going to let you guys off. Deuces. Hope you enjoyed.